All right, next up is Oregon State, who has promoted defensive coordinator Trent Bray to head coach. Trent Bray, he was a former Oregon State linebacker from 2002 through 2005. He was also the linebackers coach at Oregon State from 2018 to 21, and then he was the DC, of course, the last 2 seasons. And you know what? Trent Bray also, he very briefly served as the interim head coach for Nebraska back in 2017. I don't know if many people realize that. So Trent Bray is he's been around the block, and he's held multiple roles at Oregon State, was a player there, he's an alum. So he's kind of Jonathan Smith 2.0, or at least if you're an Oregon State fan, you kind of hope he is Jonathan Smith 2.0. So what are your thoughts on this hire, and what's your grade for it?
Let's go D+ for defense. Because you're telling me this is the best Oregon State could do was promote their defensive coordinator. I get that he's an alum. I get that he's seen the program through its highs and lows. But this was one where I'm like, I get that Oregon State's Power 5 status is kind of in a flux right now because it's only them and Washington State who make up a conference now. And I get that Mountain West competition is probably what it will be, at least for the immediate future. But you're telling me they could not have plucked one of the rising stars in the Mountain West or the Sun Belt, or threw a bag at Summerall instead of Tulane doing it, to bring him in? So nothing against Trent Bray, and he could do phenomenal there. But for me, and for my assessment, and for the guy that he's following, and for the exodus that is coming with Oregon State, and for the future of the program in general, I think this is a sign. I really think it's a sign of things to come. I would be very shocked to see Oregon State in a position of prominence in the near future, just given what happened to their conference and this direction they're taking with their head coaching hire. Because let me say this, shoot, if I'm an offensive stud quarterback, I'm not necessarily wanting to go play for a guy who's predominantly a defensive minded head coach, unless he's just got an absolute rock star of an OC and a QB coach in that room.
Boy, Gonzo, Oregon State fans are going to be coming for your head in the comments. I can already see it right now. Boy, so I have a different take on this one. So my grade is actually going to be a B+. It's going to be a B+ for kind of the same reasons that you said. I just have a different spin on it. I think if you're Oregon State right now, I mean, yeah, you're right. What kind of coach on the outside is going to take this job right now? If you're Oregon State, Jonathan Smith totally just left you at the worst time. He left you when you were vulnerable and you were in a committed relationship, and he left you when you were at your most vulnerable. What type of person is going to take that job right now with the state that they're in? So to me, to get a guy that is a former player, an alum, a guy that has coached there in multiple roles before, that loves the program, that is the best case scenario in my opinion, because that kind of is the best thing that you could do. If anything, in the tumultuous time that Oregon State's experiencing right now as a program, you want somebody that actually loves the program, that has the connections, not somebody from the outside that doesn't really care about the program, that's just going to leave you in 3 years if they're successful. So from that perspective, I actually think Oregon State, this was the best case scenario for them, was having a guy like Bray internally that you could promote to head coach to sort of steady the ship while it's going through some rough seas right now. So I give it a B+, and it's not an A because obviously there's huge risk here. Trent Bray's never been a head coach, so he may fail as a head coach. There's a lot of guys that, he was a good defensive coordinator. Some guys were they're meant to call plays, they're meant to be coordinators, but they can't run programs. They're just not meant to be head coaches. We see that a lot. Manny Diaz, who we'll get to later, he's a good example of that. So from that perspective, I think it's a risk. That's why it's not an A. But in terms of the process by which Oregon State needed to get to this hire, I think this is the best that they could have done. So that's a huge reason why I'm giving this a higher grade. You need somebody that loves the program right now to steady the ship. And I think that's what Trent Bray does for Oregon State. So that's why I'm going to give it a B+.
It could very well work out. I just, by default, am not the biggest fan of the internal promotion. But I say that, LSU promoted and he won a title. So that doesn't say it doesn't work. But I guess it's more of just me personally. I'm a bigger fan of casting a net, but you raise valid points of sometimes it's just better to go in-house to get a guy who gets it. So we'll see what it holds for Trent Bray and Oregon State. I'm by no means rooting for him to fail or anything like that. I'm just not wowed by the hire myself.
I mean, if Oregon State wasn't in the current state that it is, if it was in different circumstances, then I probably would agree with you more. But because of where Oregon State football seems to be going right now, that's why I think it is a solid hire. But yeah,
Absolutely.
good points on both sides here. So if you're an Oregon State fan, please be respectful, but let us know your opinions in the comments. We know you guys blew up our other video that we made, so let us know what you guys think about this one.
I'm saying I've been preaching build the dam the last 2 years. So
Oh, you have. We've been an Oregon State pod, so you Beavers fans out there, if you're coming in the comments and hating on us, just know we've been Oregon State cheerleaders for the last 2 years. So yeah. Anyways,